Oh man. I can't believe I'm making a video on this, but you know what? For you guys, it's for you. It has to be done. So the new movie GOTTI starring John Travolta has got to be one of the most excruciating cinematic experiences I've ever had to sit through. Everything I can possibly think of that can go wrong in a movie, like acting, directing, lighting, editing, they're all done very poorly. I didn't expect to see this whatsoever when walking into this movie, in which we're gonna get into how I got into this mess in the first place, like right now. Okay, so there's this marketing campaign in which their Twitter account, they're promoting their score that they're receiving on Rotten Tomatoes, and they're showing it off like it's a good thing. It's got a 0% on critic score, but a 70% on the audience score, and weirdly enough, with the consensus being, forget about it.
Forget about it.
Wow, what an excellent way to promote your movie. And they're showing this in their promotional campaign through social media, and I'm not even joking, basically them saying, critics hated the movie, but audiences loved it, so who do you trust more, yourself or a troll behind a keyboard? GOTTI! Which I advise any future filmmakers out there, and God forbid this happens to any of you, but to anyone who so happens to make a bad movie in their career, please do not insult your audience during your theatrical run. People like myself look at this and find it as a joke because we see in so many ways how this can be the most unprofessional thing any official social media account can handle criticism.
You serious?
How they respond to some of the people is perfect evidence for that. It's quite hilarious. But you know what? They got me. I saw this campaign. I discovered the existence of this movie because I've never seen a single trailer on this thing. I used my movie pass. I watched this movie. It's probably one of the biggest mistakes I've made so far today. GOTTI is one of those movies that takes a very interesting figure and managed to turn them into the most uninteresting person to watch on screen. It reminded me of how they grabbed Tupac, one of the greatest musicians in the history of my opinion, and made All Eyes on Me, which is just a brief rundown of how Tupac wrote each song and what sequence of events inspired him to write some of the most iconic songs ever. They never got into the mind of Tupac and how he was as a man, but instead just a very Hollywoodized representation of how the writer perceived this musician. And the funny thing is, at least 3 people who actually knew Tupac in real life says what happens in All Eyes on Me never actually happened in real life. Now take that example, place it onto John Gotti, and you got yourself GOTTI, starring John Travolta. Now, I never even knew Gotti was a real person until they started showing montage of news clips and videos revolving around the mob boss within the intro. And probably because I live here on the West Coast and he's mostly based in New York. I mean, call me uncultured or stupid if you want. Seeing how this movie executes this type of storytelling to remind us that this is a real person. Let's cover his life through the media, which I don't mind at all too much. Is it a bit cliche? Yeah, sure, whatever. It's just how they were able to incorporate things that happen in his life that feels like a recap and not an actual movie. You know how on The Wolf of Wall Street, it covers events that happens within Jordan Belfort's life and how it builds up on how much of a douchebag this guy really is. And towards the end, you start to see everything that he's done, it's leading up to some consequences. All that came from a good script as each scene smoothly transitions into the next. But GOTTI's script places some real life occurrences and is never brought up again within the movie. Most of the script handles the storytelling oh, he put a hit on this guy, oh, his kid died, but now he's gonna bring this guy into the mob, and now he's gonna put a hit on this. It's just a rinse and repeat process of the same beat, and it gets boring. This movie covers his life, and which they don't really need to, because you can literally look it up for yourself and read about him. Instead, they should show how GOTTI is as a person. It would have made for a more focused and balanced screenplay, which 90% of the problems are then brewed, and then we are so ever blessed with the final project. I would say John Travolta is the best part of this film, considering he's portraying the title character. If he doesn't work, then the whole movie doesn't work. I don't know who GOTTI was until after seeing this movie, so I can't say if he did a good job replicating the character on screen, but he didn't give a good performance at all. But he wasn't the main issue, which again, it's how this movie decides to tell its story, and how extremely unprofessional this movie looks. From the opening shot, you're able to instantly tell this movie was gonna have some poor lighting, but I never expected it to have such ugly color grading that it made me wonder if the editors gave a shit during post-production. Whenever there was a scene being shot with little to no lighting whatsoever, it has this amateur film grain look to it, as if they shot it on a $500 DSLR camera, and it's very inconsistent throughout the film. Sometimes it wouldn't look as bad, sometimes it will look as if a new filmmaker is just beginning to film at nighttime and doesn't bother to have reshoots. Speaking of which, hold on, like, what's the budget of this movie? Gotti, Wikipedia. The most reliant of all news sources, right? Oh my god. It's the $10 million movie. That's $8 million more than Get Out. Where did all that budget go? Probably towards Scientology. One of the most frustrating things about the movie is like how it manages to bring other important figures that are a crucial part of John Gotti's life and make them extremely forgettable. Some of them would have their own narration and introduction of who these characters are, and some completely get brushed over so it can continue with the story. It made me lose track of all these mobsters based on how poorly they decided to bring these characters in. It's like, oh, here's this guy, remember his name. So they do absolutely nothing with that. So when it gets to a moment where a couple of them get killed off, and as sad as it is, I really didn't give a shit because this movie decided to not show who they are as characters. More evidence on how the script is terribly written, actually. Like, all the dialogue was terrible and unconvincing for a mobster movie. Like, there's this one scene in particular that stuck with me just how bad it really is. I think John Gotti and his family are celebrating New Year's on the streets circa 1985. And weirdly enough, they're playing a Pitbull song for some reason at a New Year's party in 1985. And here comes John Gotti Travolta to the rescue and said, "Forget about it," and intimidates the cops, and they leave the scene. They don't bother to make some of these people, besides Gotti, to look older as time progresses in the film. Like how the son looks exactly the same from 1978 to 2002. No makeup or prosthetics to make him look older. It's poorly edited on how it jumps from the 70s, the early parts of John Gotti's rise to the organized crime, to early 2000s where he's in jail. So some movies do a good job doing time jumps, we've seen that before, but Gotti does it so terribly that it makes you instantly forget what even happens in the scene before. It really pains me to talk about the audience-loved film in such a negative way, and maybe yes, we are trolls behind the keyboard, such as myself. Alright, look, Gotti, take my word for it, it has to be one of the worst films I've seen this year. It makes 50 Shades Free to look like a masterpiece. At least it was shot well, and you understood what was going on. This movie literally had no focus, and it pains me to see how someone can greenlight this $10 million movie, whereas you have young aspiring filmmakers out there who have way more experience and skill, they can't get their hands on that type of budget. It's a travesty on how this happens, but that's the world that we live in, and we can learn on how to not make a movie like this. So yeah, that's all I gotta say about Gotti. But I do want to say thanks for watching this video. I had a lot to say about this movie, and I'm curious to all the poor souls out there who saw it, what you guys thought about the movie. Also, if you haven't turned on your notifications, that little bell icon, please do so you'll be updated on all my videos. And the new short film that I made, Two Graves, which is uploaded and ready to be watched. Check that out. I had a lot of fun making that, and yeah. And I'll see you guys next time, talking about the next movie conspiracy where critics hate it, but the audience loved it movie. So I can't wait for them to insult their audience. So, alright, so see you guys later.
Forget about it.